Welcome, Joe Abercrombie, to Australia. Thank you very much for coming in to visit Shearer's.
It is a pleasure, an honour and a privilege, definitely, to be here.
Thank you. You're here in Australia for GenreCon, which according to their website is for authors whose books are relegated to their own corner of the bookstore. Now, how do you feel about that description in relation to fantasy fiction, and why do you think genre fiction authors never win major literary awards?
Well, I suppose on the awards, I've always felt that awards are for a certain type of work generally, even ones that pretend to be for the best of a given year. They usually have a tone, and people kind of know what the tone of the award is, and people who like the taste of the judges, whoever they may be, are kind of directed towards the sort of books they like. So I think it would be a bit odd if prizes that traditionally go to literary books are suddenly given to fantasy books, and vice versa, because I'm not sure it would help. So I'm not one who's tremendously jealous of literary authors getting their own awards and they can have their prizes, why not? As far as the corner of the bookstore goes, my feeling's always been that, Lord of the Rings, for example, is one of the most successful books of all time. It's been adapted into one of the most successful movie franchises of all time. So you don't really get more mainstream than that, and you don't get more fantasy than that. So to my way of thinking, big titles within every genre become entirely mainstream, and that's the way it always has been and the way it should be. So I think fans of genres are sometimes get a bit of a victim complex about not getting the respect and admiration that they and their genre deserve, and I think there's no need to worry too much about it. Just write what you like, read what you like, and be happy.
And just be happy you got the whole corner to yourself, maybe sometimes.
Exactly, yeah, exactly. Why not?
You'll be happy to know that you're not in a corner here in our bookstore.
That's
you're
good to
right
know.
out in the open.
Yeah. Up front is always nice.
Indeed. You've been heralded many, many times as the master of a more contemporary, darker and grittier fantasy fiction. Is that how you would describe your work?
Yeah, I don't regard myself as a kind of flag bearer for anything, I don't think. That's a dangerous position to be in. It attracts a lot of fire. I'd rather be at the back, in the rear areas, letting other people carry the flags. I suppose I just write the sort of books that I like, and the sort of stuff I'd like to read. So I guess dark, gritty, realistic, morally ambiguous, those are the sort of things that I enjoy often. So that's the kind of thing I try and write, but I'm not trying to do some manifesto about how everyone should write. That's just the way I like it.
Many of your series include quite complex character development and heroes who are closer to anti-heroes. We also quite often view the narrative from multiple points of view. How difficult is it to pull this off? And do you see character-driven narratives as the best way to tell your stories?
Yeah, I suppose I had the feeling that a lot of fantasy tends to be very big, focuses on the setting a lot at the expense of the characters maybe. To use a filmy metaphor, it's kind of told in big wide shots and the characters appear as these tiny figures in a sort of distant, huge landscape, and I wanted the characters to be very much up front and in the foreground. To me, a good story is about good characters, and so that always seemed the right way to write, to really try and get as much of a sense of the characters in as possible, to write from a time point of view, and so that's always been the approach that seemed to make the best sense to me.
You now have a trilogy and 3 standalone yet related titles published since 2006. Now, in the fantasy genre, we do see a lot of drawn-out series with a lot of books inside of them.
Really?
You really have been bringing out books at a heady pace. How do you manage it, and how do you maintain this pace?
Well, mostly I cheat, which is what I do wherever possible.
I believe it.
Yeah, I had a bit of a head start. When I signed a deal, I was already halfway through my second book, and the first book didn't come out for a year or two. So I was well underway with the third, and so I was more than a book ahead to begin with, which has meant that over time that head start's kind of eroded. So the books have been published more quickly than they've been written, if you like. It's generally taken me about 20 months per book, but they've been published maybe 14, 15 months apart. So I can't say that I'll always be able to maintain that pace, sadly. I try to kind of, produce as fast as I can. I think it's important to try and, be professional, but every writer has their own process and their own way of going about things, and in the end, one interesting thing about writing is that, no one else can produce that book.
Yeah.
If your contractor is not getting your house done on time, you can get another contractor to do the work. But if the writer is not getting the book written, then you got to wait.
Yeah.
So, sadly, you just got to wait till it's done.
I won't ask you too much about the next next books you'll be producing, but I have heard that you want to flesh them all out first. It's a trilogy, I think, and you want to flesh them out first before you'll see the first book published. Is that right? Or
yeah, I mean that was the plan. I was lucky with the first trilogy because I had the chance to finish the first book with the third book well underway, so I knew exactly where I was going and I could make it as coherent as I was capable of doing. I mean, obviously if you put a book out there and then continue to write a series, you're stuck with whatever you've published, and if you get to the end of the third book and think, if only that character had been a woman, I could have done fantastic things, you're kind of stuck with him being a man now. You can't change anything, so I want, if possible, to draft the whole thing in one go, and then polish up each book one at a time, so that I can make sure the whole thing's cohesive, and also so that instead of there being a kind of rush always to get a book out, there can be a nice considered process. Once the first one's out, with the other two we can decide exactly when we want to publish them for best effect, and get everything nice and sedate and all the ducks in a row commercially, which I think is a good idea. And then hopefully, if people have to wait a little for the first one, they won't have to wait too long for further instalments. This is the plan. But of course I make no promises at all, ever, about anything.
Joe, you are a publisher's dream, I tell you.
Oh yes. Yes, or possibly their worst nightmare. I don't know.
And a reader's as well.
Yeah, could be.
Now, The Heroes got a lot of really great press. It just was,
yeah,
people
it did,
really loved that book.
Yeah, it's a good book. Yeah, my mum was a huge fan of that book. She loved it.
Well, our readers are too. So, were you nervous bringing out Red Country, particularly as you're once again moving into new territory for Joe Abercrombie readers?
Yeah, well, I think you're always nervous with any book. I mean, you're nervous throughout the writing of it, and the difficult thing with writing is that people are always reacting to old work in a way. So even this book, this new book, is stuff that I wrote a couple of years ago in some cases. And so a good reaction to a previous book is a bit of a double-edged sword. Obviously it's a lot better than the alternative, but it's still added pressure for the new thing, because when people are saying, I love this book, you're thinking to yourself, yeah, but will you love my new book?
Yeah.
And as you say, it's a slightly different thing. I try and do something a bit different each time. So, yeah, I certainly was nervous. I mean, I was nervous whether people would like the kind of Western element that it has. Nervous whether people would like the characters. During the writing of it, I was kind of very worried about how one character worked. There's usually one character who gives me trouble, always, in a book. But I feel it's come together pretty nicely. And, I think one thing that I'm quite perversely pleased about, if you like, is that there doesn't seem to be ever any real consistent opinion about which is my best book.
Oh, yeah.
Some people like one, others like another. So I've read a lot of reviews about this book that say, oh, it's definitely the best one yet, and other ones that say, way the worst. What people that say, this is a big improvement after the very disappointing The Heroes, and people who say, this is a real come down after the excellent The Heroes. And the interesting thing is they always say this stuff as though it's the incontestable fact. Yeah. They know the truth. But there's always a spread of opinion, and I think over time you get used to that, and you accept that people will have strange and widely differing views.
True enough. So why did you choose the Western? Was it something you wanted to explore, or something that had come into your, come to you recently, or?
Yeah, I mean, I've always been a big fan of Westerns, and as a kid, when I grew up, if you turned on the midweek matinee, it would usually or often be a Western. And I just liked the feel of them. I liked the kind of the tough guys playing by their own rules, and the kind of amazing landscapes, and the conflict between civilization and savagery and all those things. And I just thought it would be an interesting match for fantasy stuff. I mean, it's not a Western in the sense of its setting, obviously. It's not in America, so there's no six guns and there's no chaps, sadly. You can wear them while reading it, if you so desire, that's up to you. I don't judge you. But It's Western in the sense it has a huge unmapped frontier, settlers moving out into an unmapped wilderness and trying to carve out new lives, and a few narrow-eyed standoffs in windswept streets between men of violence trying to escape their bloody pasts, all that stuff. I was just keen to kind of give it a go, combine it with fantasy and see what came out, really.
And we do see the reintroduction of Logan Ninefingers, so nice to see him again.
It's a rumour I can neither confirm nor deny. Yeah.
Oh dear.
Yeah, I mean, I try to kind of reuse characters where I can and where it seems to make sense. If there's a hole in the plot for a certain type of character and I've got one I've used before, I try to use them again, because I think that gives readers a bit of a sense of continuity, and it saves me work, which has got to be a good thing.
Well, thank you very much, Joe Abercrombie, for visiting us today. Joe Abercrombie's new book, Red Country, is out now, so we're very happy to have you in the country, and wish you all the best for the rest of your trip.
Thank you, pleasure. Go and buy it immediately.
Yeah. Thank you.